SANDHAN, All Gujarat Integrated Classroom.
સેટેલાઇટના માધ્યમથી જોડતી કડી એટલે સંધાન.
Hello young friends, how are you? Good morning. I warmly welcome to this live talk on auxiliaries. I hope this is the topic which you have been learning for so many years. This is something which is very much familiar to all of us. This is the topic which we have been using and are using every day. And this is the topic without which we just can't go. That is auxiliaries. Friends, as the term itself suggests what auxiliary is. But before that, I would like to go rather in detail just to a kind of warming up exercise so that we can reach exactly where we want to go. Now, auxiliary is a part of speech. That is what you have also learnt at various levels in schools and colleges. Now, this is the list of the parts of speech in English. Actually, these parts of speech occur in almost all languages. So, verbs, nouns, adjectives, adverbs, conjunctions, prepositions, interjections, and there are several others, including the auxiliaries. So, these are the main parts of speech of English, and you know each of these, and you know the functions, how they function in a sentence. Most parts of speech we use in our everyday conversation. Now, I may concentrate on verbs because we would like to talk about auxiliary verbs. So, let me go to the parts of speech of verbs and let me explain rather in brief so that you can, it would be easy for you to reach exactly to the spot. Now, verbs, as you know, it denotes the action of the subject of the sentence. And I have given you very easy sentence. Ram killed Ravan. Now, as we know, Ram is the subject. Ram is the noun also. It is noun which is occurring as the subject. And the verb which is there, it is italics. So, killed is the verb which denotes the action done by the subject, that is Ram. So, killed has always association with the noun or the subject. Verb has something to do first with the subject. So, here the killed, which is italics, you can find that it is the verb and it tells what the subject, that is Ram, is doing or has done or did. So, this is the verb which stands for the action, movement or anything which is done by the subject. You can also see, friends, that the killed verb or the first form is kill. It denotes some action and it has got specific meaning. When one says I do, I did, or for example I read, all these verbs denote some activity and it has got some specific meanings also. So, first thing to remember regarding the verbs is that they denote some action and next they have got their specific meanings. This is very important to remember when we talk about the verbs, main verbs and auxiliary verbs. So, the main verbs stand for meaning and action of the subject. Now, we can also classify the verbs in a number of ways. As you can see in the slide, verbs are classified in different ways. For example, regular and irregular verbs. It is very easy to remember, you friends, because we have been using this type of verbs every day. As you must be knowing, regular verbs are those verbs which take ed form, ed, when we use them in the past form or maybe past participle. As against these regular verbs, irregular verbs do not have ed form, they do not take ed in the past or past participle forms. But there is some change in their spellings or the format. For example, if I say walk and the past tense is walk, but if I say go, that is verb, but in the past tense it is went, and in the past participle form we have gone. So, all three forms are different in the base form. second form and the third form. So there is change in the spelling, there is change in the format of the spelling. So they are called irregular verbs as against the regular verbs which generally take ed only in both the forms, that is second form and the third form. So this is the first kind of classification of verbs, and I think it is very commonplace for us to remember this. It is just on the basis of the past and past participle forms that we can isolate which verb is regular verb, which is not. So it is very easy for us to remember. Next is transitive and intransitive verbs. This type of verbs we generally remember when we are doing the exercises on the active and passive voices. So the verbs which take objects, they are verb transitive. The verbs which do not take objects with them, they are verb intransitive. For example, I read the Gita. In this sentence, read is the verb which is directly associated with the object, that is the Gita. But if I say I go, and you can see that even if I do not add anything, the meaning is very much clear. It doesn't require as such any specific object. But just when I say I add, then you always expect something me to add, maybe a fruit, maybe anything else. So that is the verb transitive which always takes objects with them, as against the verb intransitive which generally never take any object. We are not required to put an object, and again without object the meaning is very much clear. Just as I said, I went, and you are not expected to add anything, the meaning is complete in itself. And the third type of classification is the main and auxiliary verbs. That is our prior area or prime area of discussion today, friends. So main verbs, as I told you earlier, they have got their specific meanings, they function in a specific way, they have direct affiliation with the verb subject or the noun of the sentence, and they have their own function. They may take object, they may not take object. As against this are the auxiliary verbs which have no specific meaning of their own, but they are auxiliary because they help the main verb or the sentence construction in so many ways. Though they may be main verbs also, when they occur as the auxiliary verbs, there is no specific meaning of each of these auxiliary verbs. This is very important thing we should always remember. The basic difference between the two, I mean the main verbs and auxiliary verbs, is in terms of meaning when they appear or when they occur in the respective sentences. In the next slide, I would like to show something more about that. I have clarified how they differ, the main and auxiliary verbs. As you can see in the slide, main verbs have their own distinctive meanings and they denote action of the subject. That is prime condition of the main verbs. They are bound to have the meaning, and what they do is they denote the meaning, action, movement done by the subject of the sentence. So sentence is not complete in general without any main verb. You cannot have just I and the sentence is complete. No, without further reference or a prior reference it cannot be. So main verb is the heart of the sentence in a way. As against these main verbs, you can see the clarification. I have explained what auxiliary verbs are in the next dot, which auxiliary verbs have know their distinctive meanings. They are called helping verbs. That is very important. They are called helping verbs because they help the sentence construction in so many ways. So they have got no specific meaning, but they help, and because their function of helping the main verbs or the sentence construction, they are called the helping verbs or the auxiliary verbs. In the next slide, I would like to show some specific aspects of the auxiliary verbs. First of all, let me clarify regarding the types of the auxiliary verbs. Friends, it is very easy for us to remember all these things because we have learned this for several years and even at various levels in the colleges. Now auxiliary verbs may be broadly classified into two types. One is primary auxiliaries and the other is models or model auxiliaries. Today I am going to talk about the primary auxiliary verbs, and I have shown them in the bracket: do, have and be. They are called the primary auxiliary verbs. As against those are the model auxiliary verbs. I have given some of the examples of the models also. Shall, can, may, they are called the model auxiliary verbs. In today's lecture, friends, I am going to talk about the function and forms of the primary auxiliary verbs. Very often they are also referred to as the main auxiliary verbs. Now, as you can see, friends, do, have and be, they have got their distinctive meanings. In that sense, they can also occur as the main verb. They can also function as the auxiliary verbs in a particular sentence. Now, as I told you earlier, friends, the auxiliary verbs help the main verbs or the sentence construction in so many ways. Now, these are some of the examples. These are some of the uses in which we can say the auxiliary verbs are very much helpful. In such sentences, friends, let us remember that when they occur as auxiliary verbs, they do not carry any specific meanings, but they help the sentence construction in the following ways. First and foremost, in making the negative. When we have got assertive sentences and we are asked to turn them into negative, generally we need the help of the auxiliary verbs. As we shall see later on, how they help us and how the auxiliaries are helpful in making the sentences into a negative. We can have plenty of examples. Next is, we can also use them in the interrogative sentences. In absence of any other primary auxiliaries in the sentence, we generally use do form to make into the negative sentences. So they also help the main verb to turn them into negative, to turn them into interrogative sentences. Next use of this verb, I mean main auxiliary verbs, is in the short answers. I will give you plenty of examples, and there are some questions in the examinations also when you are supposed to answer in brief. So in such sentences, we are supposed to use the auxiliaries only, without which you cannot give your answer in short. And last but not the least is, it denotes tenses also. Very often, in absence of specific tense showing auxiliary, especially in the simple present tense, they denote tense also. When I was talking about the short answers, we can also say that, and I would like to add that in question tag patterns also, we are supposed to use the model auxiliaries, auxiliaries also. So they are very much required. They help the main sentences in so many respects. And to conclude about I would like to conclude with the models in a one line only, that they denote the mood of the main verb. They help the main verb to reinforce the mood of the action. So they are called the model auxiliaries. My focus today would be on the primary auxiliaries. They are do, have and be. I would like to talk about their forms and functions in different ways. Friends, we shall also have some time for discussion and your questions. It would be a kind of interactive talk. So prepare your questions. When there is time for you may ask the question later on. Now let us concentrate on the auxiliary verbs only. In the next slide, friends, you can see that these are the three primary auxiliaries: do, have and be. They are called the primary auxiliary verbs. Now, as I told you earlier, all these three verbs, do, have and be, they can also occur in a sentence as the main verbs. For example, I do my work regularly. Here do is used, but do is used in this sentence as the main verb. But when I turn it to negative, I would like to seek the help of do as the auxiliary form. So when I make it into negative, I use I do not do my work. Here, friends, you might have seen do occurs twice, but the function of the two is totally different from each other. So first thing we should remember is that they have no specific meaning when they occur as the auxiliary in the sentence. They just help the main verb or the sentence construction in different ways. How it helps, I think I have told you earlier. So this is the prime difference between the two. In the next slide, friends, I gave you the example, and I will again give you one more example. Though they seem alike, I mean the verb form of do, have and be, they are alike in the main verb and in the auxiliary form. So they are same, but the function is different. I will give a very simple example to make my point very much clear. And friends, you can find plenty of such examples when you come across so many things in English. You may read, you may find, you may have some conversation, and you will find that you very often use these two forms in different way. So the next slide shows one example. I have given you very fine example, friends. You may read Ram and Shyam do not do any illegal activity. Now I have italics. You find do in italics, and the other do is underlined. Now let us consider how they appear here and how they function differently. As I told you, main auxiliaries help the sentence pattern into negative. Now do not is the negative, but in the main sentence, for example, Ram, it can be like this: Ram and Shyam do illegal activity. But when we turn into negative, there in absence of any other be form or any other auxiliary, we are supposed to use do because it is present tense and a plural form of the I mean nouns are into plural.